The DC Extended Universe is finally over. Now that Aquaman and the Last Kingdom is out, it's time to watch all these movies again and rank them on this tier list. Also, I'm gonna have to use this order to avoid any copyright issues. And I'm gonna start where this universe began, Man of Steel. I'm gonna be brave and give a hot take right off the bat. I like this movie. I think a lot of people criticize it for being too drab and dreary, but I'm sorry, I just don't see it. From the very beginning with the Civil War on Krypton, there's a very clear message of hope and optimism. Superman's parents sent him to Earth to be a beacon of hope. Jonathan Kent wants Clark to grow up to become something great, to be a symbol of hope. Hell, the Superman logo itself means hope. This whole movie is very positive. I agree that Superman's silliness and awkwardness isn't here and is missed, but that doesn't mean this movie is super dark or depressing. And Henry Cavill plays the character very well. He's charming, he's likable, and he really delivers in the more emotional scenes. And the rest of the cast is really top notch. Russell Crowe gives a really standout performance as Jor-El, and the scenes with him on Krypton are awesome. Honestly, I wouldn't mind a whole movie of just him. Diane Lane and Kevin Costner as the Kents are great. They serve as the movie's emotional core. And the villains in this movie are also really special. Bayora and Namek are really imposing side villains, and their fight with Superman in Smallville is very memorable.
Can I get a waffle?
This movie is now 10 years old, but Zod is still one of the best villains in this universe. I like how instead of being an evil version of the main hero, a trope that many other comic book movies fall into, he is instead an evil version of Jor-El. These two both agree that Krypton is dying, but they disagree on how to fix it. Jor-El believes that Krypton had its chance, and he puts the future of the race in Clark's hands. But Zod thinks the way to fix things is to relive Krypton's mistakes by conquering other worlds. It's a really interesting difference between these two characters, and Zod is a very intimidating villain. He's just as strong as Superman, but like evil and stuff.
Activate torpedo mode! Oh, yeah!
He also has the world engine, which is a really cool set piece, and the scene where Superman destroys the engine is actual perfection. The acting, the directing, the effects, the score, everything. This is one of the most awe-inspiring scenes ever put to film, and Hans Zimmer's score is just incredible. Even before the movie starts, you hear a few notes of music, and you know you're in for something special. This movie isn't all good though. I think there is some pacing issues. The movie tells Clark's backstory through flashbacks throughout the movie, which I don't love. I think if those scenes are played in order and we saw him grow up, deal with his powers, experience his dad's death, and then have his first flight, I think that would have been more emotionally compelling. But yeah, I don't think I forgot anything. Oh. Yeah, Lois is in this movie too. She kind of feels like an afterthought. Her story isn't too interesting, and her romance with Clark feels very underbaked. And I know going forward she isn't going to be very important, so that's a bummer. But all in all, I think Man of Steel is a great start to this universe, so I'll put it in A tier. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Yeah, this movie kind of sucks. But I want to emphasize, if you enjoy this movie, that's awesome. I'm glad this movie has an audience. But it's really just not for me. Right off the bat, this movie has a very clear bias against Superman, and I don't think it intended to have a bias against him, but it does. Up until the last few minutes of the movie, Superman is constantly hated. He's hated by Batman, by the government, by Lex Luthor, and by the world itself. And in every scene we get of Superman where he's saving someone from a burning building or helping people from a flood, the scene is framed in such a negative way, and the whole movie itself is a real downer. It's so nihilistic that it's hard to see how it's a sequel to Man of Steel, which was so hopeful and optimistic. And it doesn't help that both Superman and Batman are murderers now. They both kill people and threaten to kill people throughout the movie, and it's to the point where they don't feel like the characters they're supposed to be. Superman does get one human scene though. He gets really sad and calls his mom, which relatable. Ben Affleck is a really good actor, and I think he makes for a good Batman. And I think it makes sense for Batman to be suspicious of and have a vendetta against Superman. I think Batman having this darker story makes sense, but the rest of the movie matches that darkness, so there is no levity at all. But at least this movie has some more Superman characters in it. It has Jimmy Olsen. Oh, it has Mercy Graves. It has Lex Luthor.
Cherry.
Why does this Superman movie so actively not want to be a Superman movie? The Mark Zuckerberg Lex Luthor is awful. Half the time he's off doing weird stuff like peeing in jars or stuffing Jolly Ranchers into people's faces. In the other half, he's just giving these cringe monologues. I like Jesse Eisenberg as an actor. The Social Network is one of my favorite movies, but he is really bad here. Wonder Woman is pretty cool, and I think the final fight with her, Batman, and Superman teaming up is really well done. It's just a shame that they have to fight this diseased troll. I think the Batman warehouse fight is famously really well done, even though Batman is very clearly murdering people. And I think the whole point of this movie, the fight between Batman and Superman, is also really cool. It's well filmed, it's kind of brutal, and Batman wins. The Martha scene is controversial, and I have to agree, it is kind of goofy. I understand it. I get why Bruce realizes he's wrong and why Superman can be trusted, but it just feels very clunky. And I think that's the best way to describe Batman v Superman. Clunky. So I'm gonna put Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice in D tier, because while this movie is bad, it's not as bad as Suicide Squad. The biggest issue with this movie is obviously the editing. I think it's common knowledge that this movie was just about done, but because of the negative reception Batman v Superman got, Warner Brothers in their infinite wisdom butchered this movie to make it like the MCU. And wow, did they ruin it. The pacing is awful. This movie takes a long time to actually start. We get mountains upon mountains of exposition where Amanda Waller explains who the Suicide Squad are in these super detailed flashbacks. They take the time to needlessly explain each and every character on this roster. I don't need you to explain Killer Croc to me. I understand it. He's a dude and a crocodile, and he likes BET. Good for him. They really do spend too much time explaining who these characters are and not enough time showing us who they are. And I think the best example of that is...
This is Katana. She's got my back. She can cut all you in half with one sword stroke, just like mowing the lawn. I would advise not getting killed by her. Her sword traps the souls of its victims.
Also, other people have pointed this out, but this movie is out of order. Waller picks out this specific team for a specific mission, but then the Enchantress goes rogue and takes over the city, and the Suicide Squad is assembled for the mission, and then it's a twist reveal that the mission was actually to save Amanda Waller from the city. What? Something's really not adding up here. The editing also messes up the character stories. Each character was supposed to have their own unique character arc, but none of that really happens. El Diablo is supposed to have the story where he forgives himself for killing his family and starts to treat the Suicide Squad like a new family. But in the movie, the scene of him being like, this is my family and I'm gonna fight for them or whatever comes out of nowhere. And then he sacrifices himself for seemingly no reason. Deadshot is also supposed to have a character arc of some kind, but I have no idea what it's supposed to be. What is the meaning behind this? I don't get it. It looks so goofy. The villains are also nothing burgers. They're South American magic gods or whatever. They're salty because people don't worship them, so they take over the city. Okay. And the ADR for the Enchantress is actually terrible.
The sun is setting and the magic rises.
The one thing I will praise this movie for is its casting. Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn is a cultural icon. I remember seeing this movie opening night, and there were so many Harley cosplayers in that theater, and she's great in this role. Definitely one of the few bright spots this movie has. Jai Courtney is great as Captain Boomerang, Jay Hernandez is great as El Diablo, and Viola Davis is perfect for Amanda Waller. However, I don't think Will Smith is all that great as Deadshot. A lot of the time, it seems like he's not acting, he's just being himself. And of course, we can never forget this infamous line.
What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
I could go on, but I really don't care to talk about this movie anymore. It's bad. Everyone knows it's bad, and that's why I'm putting Suicide Squad in F tier. I feel like I'm forgetting something. No. Wonder Woman is a good movie. It is a bit formulaic and very similar to Captain America: The First Avenger, but there is enough that sets it apart from other comic book movies. First and foremost, its main character. Wonder Woman is awesome, and I think Gal Gadot plays her really well. She's very charismatic. She has some great comedic moments, and I think she delivers in the more dramatic scenes. Steve Trevor is also great. A big issue with superhero movies is that sometimes the side characters can be useless, but Steve is definitely not useless. He definitely has his limitations. He's definitely not the main hero of the movie, but he's still important, and his sacrifice at the end of the movie is genuinely tragic. The villains kind of suck though. German Dude and Poison Lady or whatever, they're serviceable enough, but there's nothing especially interesting about them. And Ares is a big disappointment. They went the twist villain route, which didn't work at all. They wanted you to think that this guy was Ares, but It was very obviously the guy from Harry Potter. Ares has no real motivation or characterization, and his character design sucks. The CGI armor just does not go with that mustache, and the CGI in general is a mixed bag. Sometimes it looks really good, and other times it looks really bad. I think this movie was directed very well. So many scenes in this movie are absolutely gorgeous, and the action sequences are a lot of fun. So I enjoyed Wonder Woman more than I thought I would. I honestly don't remember it being this good. So this movie is going in A tier. All right. Let's make this quick. I feel like this movie shouldn't even count anymore, right? This movie sucks. Downright sucks. I hate just about everything in it. I'm not a Snyder fanboy at all, but even I can acknowledge how this is just a butchering of someone else's work. There are some parts where the Whedon footage and the Snyder footage fits together pretty seamlessly, but most of the time it just looks like this. And because this movie is half the length of Snyder's, a lot of stuff was cut out, especially for these three characters. Cyborg really is just here in this movie and is barely a character at all. Flash and Aquaman have a few more scenes, but again, they feel like secondary characters. This movie is supposed to be our introduction to this team, and man, does it do a poor job at doing that. Also, Steppenwolf straight up sucks. The character design is awful, the CGI looks really bad, and he's just a really flat villain. He's strong and intimidating, I guess, but this really is a coughing baby versus hydrogen bomb situation. There are some not terrible things though. The action is pretty fun, and it's only some scenes though. The whole final battle of this movie is thoroughly unenjoyable because they put this crappy red filter over it. I don't know why, but every time I watch it, I get nauseated. Also, this movie has J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon, and I will never forget these DC movies for wasting such good casting. I mean, come on, he was perfect. Honestly, the worst part of never getting the Ben Affleck Batman movie is that we'll never see him again. Good night, sweet prince. Maybe some other time. Also, I do kind of like some of the Superman stuff in this. I prefer seeing him in the blue and red instead of the black and silver. And I know it was a bit fan servicey, but I did enjoy hearing the John Williams Superman theme in the final fight.
I'm also a big fan of justice.
But that is probably just because the original Superman movie is my favorite DC movie of all time. And if you want to know why I think it's the best, be sure to subscribe and maybe I'll make a video on that one day. But I'm tired of talking about this movie, so I'm just gonna toss it in F tier and forget it exists. Aquaman is a fun movie. It feels less like a super actiony superhero film and more like a classic adventure movie. Our main characters travel to different places, solve puzzles, escape from dangers, and save the world. It's a pretty simple story, but it's paced well enough to the point where it doesn't overstay its welcome. And Aquaman is one of my favorite characters in the DCEU. He's badass, he's full of personality, and Jason Momoa plays him really well. And I think his story of becoming a king and a leader is fairly well done. This world looks great too. The costumes and the CGI are top notch. Atlantis is beautiful, and the underwater effects and fights look great. The effects go especially crazy during the trench sequence. Holy moly, does this look good. I mean, leave it to James Wan to sneak an awesome horror sequence into a superhero movie. The action scenes are fun too. The final battle is grand and epic. It really shows off how big this underwater world is. But my favorite is probably the Italy fight. Arthur and Mantis fight is awesome. Mera fighting off these goons is awesome. I love everything about this. This movie is obviously not perfect though. Personally, I don't think the side characters are. Yeah, the explosions interrupting conversations has sort of become a meme in this movie. It's really dumb, but I think in a way it makes the movie a little bit more memorable. Anyway, the side characters aren't my favorite. Willem Dafoe is great, but Volko has nothing to do after the first act. He sort of becomes a background character. Dolph Lundgren is also in this movie. I couldn't tell you anything about his character though. And then there's Mera. I think Mera is kind of a one-note character. She has this story where she learns to love the surface world, and Arthur, I guess. I don't know. I couldn't really care about her story. And the romance between her and Arthur feels like a studio mandate. Like it was supposed to happen, so it did. Kind of lame, but whatever. The villains are awesome. Ocean Master is a good, threatening villain. And I think the story of him hating the human world because it broke up his family is actually well done. And Black Manta. Oh man, Black Manta. One of the best villains in the DCU. Easily. He hates Aquaman and has actual good reason to hate Aquaman. Arthur totally left his dad for dead. Sure, they're pirates and you shouldn't feel bad for them, but I understand why in Aquaman 2 he wants to kill the baby. The setup confrontation between these two characters is something special. As of recording this, Aquaman 2 is not out yet. I really hope it delivers. Aquaman really is a crowd-pleasing movie, and it's the highest grossing movie in this franchise for a reason. So yeah, I really like Aquaman, and I'm gonna put it in B tier. Shazam is a movie about family. And I think that's the strongest part about it. Billy Batson is a great character. You understand his pain and you can really feel for him. And his story of finding new family after his mom abandoned him is so well written. And that story is helped out by the family. Each of these characters are very unique. They have their own characteristics, and it creates a fun family dynamic. And I think giving powers to all the kids was perfect. It really enforces the movie's theme of family. Zachary Levi does a good job. People will criticize his performance and say that he's acting a little too goofy and isn't as serious as Billy when he's in kid form. And while that's true, I could argue that he's acting differently because he got crazy superpowers and he's constantly being thrown into these different situations. So for this movie, I think Levi's performance is a-okay. This movie does have some pacing issues though. The middle section is a bit slow. There's a conflict between Freddy and Billy that feels kind of contrived, and I found it hard to care. Dr. Savannah is a pretty decent villain. The opening scene where we see him and his family really shows us why he's a villain. Seeing him being treated so poorly by his dad and his brother, and having the Shazam power taken away from him makes his motivations make sense. I understand why he would want to throw his brother out a window and have the powers of the 7 deadly sins. However, I think after his father and brother are dead, the character takes a nosedive. He only has beef with Shazam because the deadly sins are controlling his mind. I mean, look at this fight with Shazam. He looks super uninterested. I think if they found a way to give him some real motivation for wanting to fight Shazam, it would have been more memorable. But Mark Strong is pretty good in this movie. It's a bit of a downgrade from his previous DC role, but Green Lantern isn't exactly an A-lister anymore, not since this.
Green Lantern's got this.
That's about all I have to say about Shazam. It's a really fun family movie, so I'm gonna put Shazam in A tier. Birds of Prey and the rest of the title I don't care to read. Yeah, I really don't like this movie. I'm clearly not the target audience, and that's perfectly fine. Not every movie is made for me, and this is one of those movies. This movie has a very distinct style to it, and while at times it is very creative and cool, most of the time it's very, I'm quirky and not like the other girls. It has 5 main characters, and for one reason or another, I didn't care for any of them. Harley Quinn is mostly fine, just an extension of her character from Suicide Squad, but by nature of her being crazy, her character always feels one note. She's just the quirky, crazy character, so she's not very exciting as the film's lead. Huntress and Black Canary are both cool, but they don't get very much screen time, and because of that, they never really get moments to shine, and they feel very forgettable. Renee Montoya is also very forgettable. She does have more of a story than the other characters, but it's a really basic cop story. And Cassandra Cain. Oh man, this should be a crime. How the hell do you make Cassandra Cain, one of the coolest, most badass characters in all of DC Comics, this lame? In the comics, she is one of the toughest fighters ever. This is one of the worst character adaptations of all time. And Black Mask is terrible. He's whiny, he's not intimidating, and even Ewan McGregor can't save him. Also, he only wears the mask for like 2 scenes. Black Mask, more like guy who owns a black mask, am I right? This movie isn't all bad though. I think the action scenes are pretty fun. They're creative and have fun choreography, and some of the comedy works too, like when Harley gets a power boost from the cocaine. And also, I enjoy breakfast. I'm a breakfast guy, and the breakfast sandwich scene was easily my favorite part of the movie. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of this one, so I'm gonna put it in D tier. Oh boy, this is gonna be a controversial one. When this movie first came out, it was torn to shreds, but honestly, I don't hate it. It's definitely a step down from the previous Wonder Woman, but I like a lot of what this movie has to offer. First of all, I think Diana has a very interesting story. She gets Steve back, and it's fun to see them on screen together. I think their relationship is really well written, and they have a lot of chemistry together. And when Diana has to say goodbye once and for all, it's really sad, and you can really feel her pain. She has this story arc of letting go and living in the present, not the past. It's perfectly thematic with the overarching story of the movie, and it's really touching. However, I have to talk about the elephant in the room. Why the hell did anyone think making Steve possess this poor innocent dude was a good idea? Steve could have just been himself or a ghost or something, and the story would have been the same. Heck, it probably would have been better. But no, they had to make Wonder Woman complacent in kidnapping this guy and doing things to him against his will.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting.
It's easily the worst part about the movie. Also, the action scenes feel like a downgrade. They're not bad, but they lack the style that we saw in the first movie. I will say though, I do like both of these villains. Cheetah is pretty cool. She has a good design, she has a solid motivation, and she really is just fun to watch on screen. But Maxwell Lord is probably my favorite part about the movie. His determination to prove himself a success and to win his son's admiration is almost commendable. But Pedro Pascal's performance is awesome. I mean, come on, who can forget the life is good, but it can be better. And my favorite part about his character is that he really isn't defeated. Wonder Woman doesn't swoop down and knock his teeth out. She instead convinces him to stop himself. She reasons with Max and convinces him to see the truth. It's a really wholesome way to end the story and it reminds me of old DC comics. A lot of the times Superman or Wonder Woman or the Flash would just talk their villains down. This movie isn't perfect, not at all, and it's certainly not for everyone, but I enjoy it. So I'm gonna put Wonder Woman 1984 in C tier. Whoa, yeah. This one slaps. I was never a big Snyder fan. I didn't take part in the release of Snyder Cut stuff, but I am so glad this movie got made because it is freaking awesome. And for sure the best movie I've talked about so far. And I know this movie has a 4-hour runtime. That is a lot of movie. But not really. I've seen it 4 or 5 times since it came out, and it's never felt like it's 4 hours long. It is scarily well paced, and the extra runtime is actually necessary. This movie has 6 main characters, 1 main villain, and a legion of side characters. The long runtime lets this movie fully explore these characters and give them full fleshed out stories. And Cyborg benefits the most from this. In the crappy Whedon version, Cyborg really is just a dude who is here. But in the Snyder Cut, he is an actual character. We get to see who Victor was before the accident. He was good-natured and cared about his family. But because of his dad, he never felt like he was good enough. And when he became a cyborg, he felt even worse. Over the course of the movie, he learns to accept his new circumstances and proves to himself that he is good enough and he can really help people as a cyborg. It's a really touching story and it's the heart of the movie. And the rest of the league has good stories too. Aquaman has a story about becoming a hero. Wonder Woman has a story about getting closer to other people. The Flash has a story about realizing how capable he really is and that he doesn't have to always underachieve. Batman learns to forgive himself for what he did in Batman v Superman. And Superman realizes he doesn't have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders anymore. He can rely on others for help. Letting these characters have these stories is what makes this movie a movie. At the end, when they're all assembled after they defeated Steppenwolf, I'm not cheering just because they saved the day. I'm cheering because these characters went on their own personal journeys and are now better people because of it. And Steppenwolf is a much better villain this time around. First of all, the design is superior in just about every way. The way he walks and the way he moves, his pointy armor seemingly has a mind of its own, and the glowy axe has some really cool effects. And he has some very understandable motivations. The dude just wants to go home. Darkseid banished him however long ago, and he's willing to kill millions to make up for his mistake. Steppenwolf being such a scary and desperate character really gives this movie some urgency. And this final battle is one of the best in any superhero movie. The money shot of the group all together, Batman taking out the parademons one by one, Superman beating the absolute living hell out of Steppenwolf, and of course the best part, the Flash going back in time to save the day. This movie is everything I wanted in a Justice League movie. I love it so much, and it's gonna be our first S tier. 2021 is where this franchise peaked. This is another top tier DCEU movie. James Gunn is the best at taking D-list characters and turning them into A-listers, and this movie is no different. Characters like Bloodsport, Batcatcher, and especially Peacemaker are now some of DC's most popular characters, and that's because this movie is entirely character driven. Each of the characters are unique, and like with Justice League, they each have their own story. Bloodsport has this story of becoming a better leader and father, Polka Dot Man has a story of overcoming his mom's abuse, and King Shark has a story about making friends. It's a simple story, but he's a simple boy. And the characters have a lot of scenes together where they just talk. They talk about their past, the bad things that happened to them in their lives, the reasons why they became the villains in the first place. This movie really makes you care about them, even though they're murderers, thieves, and man-eaters. Rick Flag is a much better character in this movie. In the original, he really did feel like a basic military guy, but in this movie, he has more of a personality and his own ideals. In a lot of ways, he felt more like a hero. So when Peacemaker betrays him, man, does that hurt. They all became so close over the course of the movie, so to watch Peacemaker and Flag fight, it just sucks. And it's a tough reminder that besides all the funny jokes and smiles, Peacemaker really was a villain, and Flag's death is really sad to watch. And again, all of that is due to how great James Gunn is at writing characters. Oh, and how can I forget the Harley side quest? Normally in a movie, completely derailing the plot to show a character getting captured by the enemy government, go on a cutesy date with the leader, agree to marry the leader just to kill him 2 minutes later, would seem really out of place. But for Harley Quinn, who's such an off-the-wall character, it sort of works. This movie has a lot of great action scenes also. It has an R rating, so we get to see all the appropriate blood and guts and stuff that I can't show on YouTube. There is a surprise villain in Starro the Conqueror, and I love this. You can really understand why he hates humans and wants to control them all. I mean, the poor guy was taken from his home and tortured for 30 years. And I think the big action set piece where the squad comes together to take him down is very exciting. Although I do have one slight issue with it. Killing off Polka Dot Man kind of feels mean-spirited to me. The squad was already whittled down to 5. Did you really need to kill any more people? Maybe I'm just soft, but it made me really happy to see him become a superhero. I really don't have many complaints for this movie. It's for sure one of the best in the franchise, so it's gonna be another S tier. Peacemaker is my favorite thing in the DCEU. Christopher Smith is my favorite character in this universe. John Cena is just so unbelievably good in this role. He's great in the comedy scenes, but man, oh man, does he deliver in the more emotional parts. And I think James Gunn did a good job at carrying over the character story from the Suicide Squad to this show. A big part of this show is Chris's abusive relationship with his father, and in the Suicide Squad, he is still very much operating under his father's ideals. Peace, no matter the cost, even to the point where he kills someone he looked up to. So watching this lost and broken man become better than what his father made him is inspiring. He actually becomes a hero over the course of this show, and it's great to see that development. The side characters are a lot of fun too. Vigilante is a riot. He's so funny, and he really adds a lot to this show. Harcourt and Diebeard are carryovers from the Suicide Squad, and it's really cool to see them get more screen time and become more fleshed out characters. Adebayo adds a fish out of water element, and her scenes with Peacemaker are a lot of fun. This series also has some good villains. The White Dragon is probably the DCEU's most detestable villain. The blatant abuse of his kids, the racism, everything about his character is disgusting. The Butterflies are good as the more important villains for this show. It's really interesting to uncover the mystery of them, and I think they are very intimidating to our main characters. Like with the Suicide Squad, I think the show has a good balance between humor and serious moments. It's really funny. I mean, it's practically a comedy, but no way does the humor trample the serious moments or make them less important. The action scenes are great as well. James Gunn is a very experienced action director at this point, and every episode has some fun and inventive set pieces, especially at the end when the gang rolls up with the show's theme song playing. I mean, that's just awesome. And speaking of which, this show has the best opening credits of any show probably ever. The straight-faced dancing is so funny, and it perfectly captures the tone of the show. I love this so much. It's the best part of this DC universe, and I'm so excited that John Cena is gonna stick around for the new DC universe. So Peacemaker is going in S tier. Wow, 3 S tiers in a row. I wonder if we can get to 4. Oh man. Alright, even though Black Adam isn't an S tier movie, I don't think it's terrible. It really is just some good old dumb fun. There's a bunch of big budget action scenes in this movie. Black Adam is awesome, and the slow motion scenes where you can see how strong he really is are pretty cool. The Justice Society has some great action too, and their different power sets make these scenes feel more unique. I think these characters are a great inclusion in this movie. Don't ask where they came from or how this organization started, because I don't know. This universe barely has a Justice League, and now they also have a Justice Society out of nowhere. But Hawkman's pretty cool. I think Cyclone and Atom Smasher have great chemistry together, and Dr. Fate is just a badass. Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate is one of those perfect comic book castings, and his sacrifice at the end of the movie is really well done. But while these characters might be cool and all, they're definitely not changing the hierarchy of the DC universe or anything like that. I'm in the camp that finds this version of Black Adam somewhat enjoyable. I'm just really happy that The Rock isn't doing his typical Rock shtick. He's actually playing a character in the movie, and I think his story is actually kind of interesting. He feels a lot of guilt over his son dying to save him, so over the course of the movie, he grows to be the hero his country thought he was. It's not amazing or anything, but there's enough here for him to be a captivating protagonist. I can't say the same for these human characters though. They're kind of boring, except for Kareem. He's cool. Also, this villain is super lame. He's just some dude who wants to be possessed by demons, and then he gets possessed, And now he's a demon. But I do think the final fight between him, Black Adam, and Hawkman is pretty cool. And his death is awesome. You don't always see someone get ripped in half hot dog style. Yeah, there isn't much to say about this movie. It's very basic. It's not spectacular. It's not awful. It's a C-tier movie. Man, this just makes me sad. The first Shazam was so good, and this one is just so This movie is really boring. First of all, how lame is it to have original villains for a character who's been around for over 80 years? He has so many different villains to choose from. I mean, they could have, I don't know, used Mr. Mind, who they teased at the end of the first movie. Instead, we get these boring god characters who aren't very threatening, are incredibly generic, and are not fun to watch at all. Also, Freddy and Anne have this romance that I don't care about. Billy has the story of learning to not cling onto his family and to let them do their own thing. And while on paper that story could be really compelling, there is no subtlety here at all. There is a scene in the beginning of the movie where Mary pretty much talks to the audience directly and says, "Hey you, audience, pay attention. I'm about to tell you the personal conflict this kid is about to overcome over the course of the movie." They couldn't be more blatant about it. There are some sweet moments like Billy finally calling Rosa mom, or Billy telling Freddy that it's okay to fly on his own. Moments like these remind me of what made the original film so special: family. I think this final fight is very climactic, and I thought Billy's death was actually heartbreaking. Despite my complaints with this movie, I have to commend its commitment to letting its main character have a proper ending that completely fits his character. Oh no, Wonder Woman's here to wreck the day. This is the end of the franchise. I think letting Billy die here would have been a good send-off for his character. He died protecting his family. I don't think every hero needs to die for a compelling story, but it works here. But no, Billy is resurrected and this franchise ends in shame. Yeah, this movie is going in D tier. I understand that this movie has its fans, but I am not one of them. I never liked Ezra Miller as the Flash, and it really doesn't help that there's now 3 of them. They just don't act like Barry Allen, at least to me. So it's really hard to enjoy a Flash movie where the Flash isn't really acting like the Flash. And on top of that, it doesn't really feel like the movie wants to be a Flash movie. Our first live action Flash film shouldn't be this huge multiversal story with a bunch of Batmen, a Supergirl, a Zod, and a bunch of other cameos. I just wanted a good Flash movie with a normal Flash villain. And yeah, this movie has some terrible CGI. If the effects aren't perfect, it obviously doesn't ruin a movie, but they are really distracting here. The slowed down scenes are bathed in this gross yellow filter, and the final battle is in this boring flat gray environment that is not exciting at all. Although they do a lot of really cool things with the lightning effects in that fight, so at least there's that. All right, let's get into it. The Chrono Bowl and the cameo scene are disgusting, and the excuse that it's supposed to look like that doesn't make it any better. That would be like if I stabbed someone and my legal defense was, "You see, Your Honor, I meant to stab him, so it's okay." Like, no, if you intend to make something bad, it will look bad. And the cameos are not good. I'm not gonna get into the controversy of resurrecting dead actors, but they just don't add much. It's a scene for the audience to point and go, "Ooh, I know him." I love Nicolas Cage more than most people. I was named after him, but even he can't save this. This movie isn't terrible though. I really like Michael Keaton's Batman and Supergirl. I'm not someone who grew up with the Keaton Batman movies, but I do really enjoy both of them. And with modern day filmmaking, we get to see him do some really cool stuff that still feels in character with this Batman. He's agile and fast, but he still feels really stiff and robotic. And Sasha Kaya is Supergirl. That's it. That's the tweet. But really, the worst part about the movie is its terrible adaptation of the Flashpoint paradox. I'm not looking for a one-to-one translation, but this movie messes up the most important part of the story: Barry learning the consequences of messing with time. Barry goes through this movie, sees people he cares about die or not even exist, and he actually goes back in time and lets his mom go and does the right thing. But then, he changes the past again to get his dad out of jail. How do you go through a whole movie and learn nothing? And it's not like this change was small enough to not affect anything. He erased Ben Affleck's Batman and replaced him with George Clooney. What the hell, man? I swear, if this movie didn't have Michael Keaton, it would be an F tier. So instead, it's going in C tier. Blue Beetle. This is probably the biggest surprise of all of the DCEU. The trailers did not do this movie justice. This is a very fun, action-packed movie with actual emotions in it. This is a family movie first and a superhero movie second. All of Jaime's family members are unique and have their own characteristics. It makes for a fun family dynamic, and the grandma, Rudy, the sister, all of them are very memorable. And Jaime himself is a cool character. He's really similar to Raimi's Peter Parker, where He's very awkward, but in a likable sort of way. And actually, there's a lot of this movie that reminds me of the original Spider-Man. This movie also has a lot of really good comedy. It's very easy for a movie like this to edge into cringe territory, but it never goes there. This movie is a riot, and I mean, they casted George Lopez for a reason. The action scenes are a lot of fun too. A lot of them do a good job at showing off what the Scarab can do, and there's actual emotion behind these fight sequences. The effects do tend to suffer towards the end of the movie, but most of the time they look really impressive, especially with a $100 million budget. This movie also has some real grit and heartbreak to it. There are some deep themes of the rich taking advantage of the less fortunate. This scientist guy gets killed in a very brutal way, and the scene where the dad dies is genuinely sad. And this movie really is one of my all-time best theater experiences. I was with my family in a theater full of families, and there were also these two D-bags vaping, which seriously, don't make other people smell your cotton candy flavored air. The whole crowd laughed and cried and cheered, and it was a good time at the movies. And that's the best way to describe Blue Beetle, a good time. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. Just a heads up, there will be spoilers for this next movie. How do you fumble this bad? Aquaman and the Last Kingdom is a big disappointment. First things first, the editing is really bad. There are a ton of awkward cuts and it's not paced very well. And there are a couple moments where they added in this artificial slow-mo, which always looks awful. Instead of filming in a frame rate where they could do slow-mo, they filmed it normally, so the slow-mo looks like this. Also, the characters are pretty disappointing. Arthur is mostly the same as in the first movie. He doesn't go through much of a story, which sucks. And also, I think Jason Momoa has too many Jason Momoa-isms. I think what he brings to Aquaman is awesome and makes the character feel more unique. But in this movie, he does take it up a notch, and it can feel like too much at times. I do think Orm is still a good character. He has a story of moving on and letting go of his kingdom. It is kind of sloppily written, but I do think Patrick Wilson plays the role very well. And Black Manta is a real mixed bag. I was so excited for the return of the best villain in the DCEU, and this movie did not do him justice. Don't get me wrong, Black Manta is still very cool. He's still the best part of the movie, and the actor does a fantastic job, but they just didn't let him be his own villain. Instead of Manta doing all these terrible things because he wants to hurt Aquaman, he does them because he's possessed by this ghoul. Also, he doesn't actually kill anyone. Black Manta talks a big game. Oh, he's gonna kill Aquaman's family and burn his kingdom to ashes. But he doesn't actually do any of that. He stabs Aquaman's dad and tries to kill the baby, but somehow they both make it. They just made him so non-threatening in this movie. But I will say though, the movie score was an absolute bop. So yeah, this movie was just not a good way to end this universe. So I'm gonna throw it into D tier, and that's it. That's the tier list. The DC Extended Universe has been really up and down, but I had fun watching these movies over the past 10 years, and I'm really gonna miss them. But I'm excited for James Gunn's new DC Universe, and I will be seated opening day for Superman Legacy. Oh, and these movies aren't in the DCEU, but they came out during the DCEU. Joker F tier, Batman S tier, and that's it. If you enjoyed this video, you should click on this one. It's a good one. You should click on it.